All right, good day, everybody. On behalf of OTORIO, ANDRITZ, and AFRY, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's timely webinar about rethinking machinery, OT, and digital security lifecycle management. My name is Yuel No, and I'm the VP of Marketing at OTORIO. With industrial machines made of many components from multiple vendors, today's machine manufacturers are effectively a critical part of the long-term end product supply chain. Industrial organizations and critical infrastructure operators must be able to trust that their machinery manufacturers have the right tools to continuously verify that their equipment complies with ever-changing security and safety policies. Today's webinar brings together 3 cybersecurity or OT cybersecurity experts from leading companies who will cover the entire security lifecycle of digital machines. Mats Carlson-Landre, OT Security Advisor at AFRY, one of the global leaders in engineering, design, and advisory services. Yair Attar, CTO and co-founder at OTORIO, who provide comprehensive solutions that simplify cybersecurity for converged OT, IT, and IIoT environments. And Tatu Limatainen, Head of OT Cybersecurity at ANDRITZ, a world-leading supplier of plants, equipment, and services in the municipal and industrial sectors. Together, they'll share insights on security by design trends, what every organization must do to ensure continuous resiliency, and real-world implementation of machine lifecycle security solutions. So let's get started with our first speaker, Mats Carlson-Landre. Mats, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll spend the first few minutes going over some of the reasons why I feel we need security by design. Hopefully I'll be kicking in a lot of already open doors, but this is an important area, so hopefully it will make it work. I don't have a clicker on my screen. Can somebody? There we go. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. Thank you. As you heard, my name is Mats Carlson-Landre, Security Advisor with AFRY in Sweden. I have a background in manufacturing and nuclear. You're welcome to read my newsletter on OT security. It's in Swedish, but Google Translate is your friend here. Next slide, please. Let's see. Yeah. I'll talk about what security by design is, and especially how it decays over time. Like the keys on this slide was probably considered a secure design at one point. Now it's not. I'll talk about how supply chains are changing, how to take a secure design into manufacturing, changes in regulatory pressure that we're seeing, and some other changes that we expect coming forward. So, what is secure by design, really? Well, to me, it's something that's able to be secure, of course. It's designed that way. It's probably secure by default. It should be difficult to make it insecure, at least by mistake. And especially important, it needs to you need to be able to make it stay secure over time. Security used to be something that you sort of had a state, but now security is turned into something you do continuously. And the same typically goes with safety and safety by design. Some important components here to think about is to choose your own supply chain very carefully, since your customers will inherit your choices in their own chain and they cannot really opt out of that. Security degrades fairly quickly over time, driven by things like increasing connectivity, the general pace of technology evolution. Expectation of security is increasing, and what is expected from a secure device. They need to fit in your customer's secure device ecosystem, whatever security frameworks they are using. And also, we need to ensure the security of our manufacturing when we do our secure machinery. Having a secure design is not enough. We need to turn it into a secure product, which typically requires some kind of secure manufacturing. These days, manufacturing is not only a physical thing, since we also need not only hardware, but software. So we need a secure software development, production, and deployment procedure. We need to remember, as machine builders, we're adding new links to our customers' supply chains, and we need to be able to verify the security of the products and the production we're using. As a customer, you need to know your supply chain, and you need to be able to work with it over time. Regulatory pressure is really picking up in this area. Authorities in most countries understand changes that are coming. They see the recent incidents in our world. I bring up a couple of examples here from the EU. We have the proposed changes to the NIS directive, NIS 2, an area where supply chain security is really in focus, along with things like structured risk management, incident response, all very active controls, if you will. And if you combine that with the responsibilities of management and rather significant sanction fees if you fail with your security program, this will definitely drive interest in security going forward. It's also a much wider scope than the current NIS directive. Manufacturing is suddenly in scope in many areas. And even if your own organization is not in scope, it might just be that your customers are. And since supply chain is heavily in focus, you might indirectly be affected as well. The machinery directive is another example. This is where safety means security, if you will. A lot of interesting challenges are being pointed at, things like managing updates without affecting safety, the safety of autonomous machinery using AI or machine learning for safety purposes. Being able to guarantee safety while you're under a cyber attack is a really interesting challenge. And also things like logging all changes to your machinery over time. So the supply chain is really changing. It used to be more of a one-time thing or a relationship. Today, it's almost taking a physical manifestation with network connections, information flow. We hear a lot of talk about software dependencies. Software bill of materials is a popular term, where you keep track of your software and the software that's beneath your software, even if it's purchased or open source or something else. Being able to do software updates, even though you may not have changed your own software, but the software that you rely on. So this supply chain relationship is more of a continuous thing nowadays, hence the picture with the ball and chain. You're sort of chained to your vendors, and if your vendor has a problem or goes out of business, that sort of transfers to you as well. And that might also be true for vendors further up the supply chain, which is really difficult to manage, of course. So, looking forward, I included a quote here from Mark Andreessen. Software is eating the world. What he meant by that is that everything will be software in the future, or we're already there in some sense, I guess, which also means that security will also be software and safety as well. I guess the good and the bad thing about software is that it can change and it needs to change. And I guess everything we do as an industry really needs to start with that understanding that secure software is software that can be maintained during the life cycle of the machinery. For you as a customer, that means signing up for long relationships when buying machinery. And for a vendor, you need to work actively both with new and old customers, and you need the tools and the procedures to take care of that change in the horizon. To make things worse, you also need to be able to manage incidents in a safe and quick way. And that's really the center of the problem. The pace of the change is increasing. And the winners here are really the ones that will be able to turn these challenges into leverage and opportunity, because security will be an important competitive edge going forward for machine builders as well as their customers. So that's it from me. I'll turn over to Yair from OTORIO.
Thank you, Mats. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Yair Atar. I'm the CTO and co-founder of OTORIO, responsible for our technological solutions. Prior to OTORIO, I was basically within the Israeli Defense Forces for a bit more than a decade, responsible for or had the opportunity to lead different security engineering and R&D positions. My last role was actually on the cyber defensive operational side. So I basically led our nation state incident response and threat hunting teams. And also I think that a lot of what we bring to the market from solutions and approach is really comes from the experience of defending mission critical infrastructures in Israel in that perspective. So when we're talking about supply chain and we're talking about the industrial market, we're talking about a very complex environment in general, but also a very complex supply chain. Because when an end manufacturer buys a machine or buys a line or sometimes buy a complete plant from a vendor, it basically consists out of many assets, physical assets like valve or a boiler, etc., but also a lot of digital assets, controllers, RTUs, sensors, HMIs, network devices. And as we go along, those types of environments are becoming more and more complex because we are becoming more and more digitalized. And what was back then, I would say the process of I'd order a machine or a line and I get it to my plant, it's being commissioned, and now I'm the one managing it. The whole process of liability and responsibility to some extent is becoming much more complex. Now, when we're talking about in parallel, the digital risk in this domain is growing rapidly. Now, there's a lot of incentives for that. When we're talking about acceleration of digitalization, adding more sensors, we want to be more efficient and we want to produce more. So we need for that to add digital aspects, but we're opening up search to more risks or expanding our attack surface in that perspective. The overall complexity is growing. So we're adding new machines, we're adding new technologies, but we still have a long history with other machines that, I mean, when we buy a recovery boiler or a pulp line, it stays for a long time. And we're talking about at the end environments that are consistent with from multi-vendors, ABB, Siemens, Schneider, etc. We're talking about different generations, assets that are from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it makes the whole attack surface or environment much more complex. And when we're talking about operational resiliency, we're talking about safety, we're talking about productivity, we're talking about uptime of environments. And this is something that we measure ourselves when we're talking about risk to operational environments. It makes the overall risk being increased and much more complex to manage. So what we are seeing today in the market is that the overall supply chain, the overall liability is becoming more a collaboration topic. Whether we're talking about, and as Matt mentioned before, it's not just handovering now a machine, but my supplier, I want them to provide me services, support services, maintenance services, sometimes operational services. So the whole life cycle of an asset is becoming much more complex, and it doesn't just start and end on a specific event. It's in a continuous manner to actually manage this risk. And I think that we also see today a lot of insurance topics that are also addressing this, because it's by the way, it's like one of the only areas in 2021 that insurance company lost money in. And they're starting to ask more complex questions. Who owns the liability? What's the vendor is doing? How do you know you have a new exposure in your environment? And then I bought a machine. Although it consisted of many smaller assets, I'm not aware of the exact assets in it. So does the vendor need to notify me when there's a new threat out there in the market? Is it a new service? Eventually, we're all commercial organizations. We want to make money. So it makes the whole process much more complex in that perspective. And I think that what we're seeing in the markets, that there is a need for a change in mindset and approach and how we are thinking about OT cybersecurity, especially when we're talking about life cycle and supply chain. First of all, there is a need for visibility. We need to understand in a more detailed manner what's inside. And it goes up to, and again, it's a complex situation because it's not just one type of asset. We're talking about RTUs, controllers, sensors, actuators, endpoints, different softwares, different applications. We need to have a continuous visibility, deep visibility into what do I have. Now, secondly, it's awareness. Not just, I would say, being aware of the whole situation, but really understand how can different stakeholders in my organization can be aware of the overall risk, of the overall topic by reports or dashboards. I have multiple types of stakeholders. We have people responsible for the machine level. We have different business units. We have CISOs on the governance level from one aspect, but we also have operational teams on the site level. So the whole stakeholders variety is complex, and this is why we need to make sure that we address those different stakeholders in the process and making them more aware of what's happening. Now, thirdly, now that I have visibility, I need to start to understand what's the risk and what's the potential impact. Now, we're talking about overall gaps, exposures, vulnerabilities analysis, and it's not just ends there, because there's a lot of security controls. And we know that in OT environments, patching is almost not feasible, or at least it's a very hard task to do, because the layering, okay, let's say I patch now a device. Who says that the application or the process running on top of it continues to run as it is? If I'm the one doing it, maybe the vendor is going to revoke the warranty. So again, there are many complexities here. And this is why we need to have a different approach of identifying measures, surroundings that can be addressed. Whether we're talking about maybe better segmentation, whether we're talking about maybe some peripheral controls that are going to help me overall reduce the risk and look not just on the vulnerability itself, but the whole potential exploitation vector. So in a nutshell, this whole process needs to be good to be managed in an ongoing manner, because the threat is changing and the environment is changing. Someone can open up a port for maintenance or whatever, and just leave it open, and you have a new potential attack vector to the environment. So how we do it? So we've built a solution, a platform that basically in a very simplified manner help our partners and customers, first of all, really identify during a commissioning, during an FAT process or an SAT process, what's in it, what's in the machine, whether it's secured compliant. So basically there's a lightweight edge device connected to the machine on a one-time or periodical type of use case, collecting data, uploading it to a central management where you now get a view of the digital footprint of this machine or line. And it can also be addressed in, I would say, periodical manners, whether we're talking about service checks, and also additionally, what we've identified is that now that I have this digital footprints of a machine or a line level or a site level, if I see a new threat that is actually affecting those types of assets, I know immediately whether I have specific lines or machines that are affected. Now, this really enables to provide really visibility, vulnerability management, and different types of gaps and exposures analysis with the right and relevant mitigation playbooks in order to support them. So in a nutshell, to summarize, I would say that there is a need to automate this process. It cannot be manual because, again, we're talking about different types of technology stacks, different types of architecture, different types of security controls, and also threat that is changing on a daily or weekly manner. So this needs to be automated in a way that simplifies the process to support a cybersecurity and digital analysis FAT or SAT process, provide better quality assurance and consistency for each and every check, also supports compliance out of the box. So we're basically matching those different gaps and exposures that we've identified on an asset level to the relevant requirement from a compliance perspective. So eventually both the vendor, the supplier, or it's ANDRITZ, for example, in this case, can really understand in a very simplified and automated manner whether the machine or line they provided is actually compliant or not. And of course, whether there are some findings, what are the actionable recommendations or mitigations that need to be addressed in order to mitigate it. All this should be in an ongoing, I would say, manner, or in a simplified also manner during an SAT or FAT or commissioning phase. So with that perspective, I will hand over to Tatu to share his experience in this perspective.
Okay, thanks, Jer, and thanks, Mats. It was extremely interesting. Maybe I would like to say a few words about myself. I don't have the controls again, so could you please? Okay, now I have the controls. So, so please, yes, I can control. So, my name is Tatu Liimata. I'm a head of OT cybersecurity at ANDRITZ. So my background is working with DCS vendors 10 years on Honeywell on projects and also R&D work there. And now 15 years in ANDRITZ doing a lot of these solutions and running pulp and paper SOC for the cybersecurity operations. And now of taking this global position, also working together with OTORIO and key stakeholders like AFRY to really strengthen our cybersecurity position. And that's kind of leads us kind of practical implementation what we want to do as when Jer mentioned this out of the box cybersecurity. So and solution security was mentioned by Matt. So all of our solutions and our machines will be type tested. So that's the requirement that is coming from the IEC standard, and that's 4.1 and 4.2 of the standard. And we will of course do it. I will explain why we are following so closely this standard. It's part of our coming from our quality. So we don't actually have any other option than follow the standard on all of our deliveries. And that means also that all of the delivered machines, we will check that the cybersecurity is done according and the hardening and the patching is done according the standard, so that we can give that compliance report to our customers saying that this machine delivery fulfills the standard when it's coming out of the path checking. But surely the journey doesn't end there, so we can, depending what are the liabilities and are we still liable after the SAT testing even of our as a system integrator, as mentioned in the IEC standard, then we will continue these exercises enforcing that cybersecurity for our solutions, and then we can also provide us this kind of a service for our customers, 24/7 service, running these scans and cybersecurity, of course, utilizing remote connectivity so that we have the access so that it can run continuously on the sites. So I think this layout was actually pretty good when it emphasizes that what is our out-of-the-box responsibility, making sure that our solutions, delivered solutions, are secure. Every delivery is secure, and when we hand it over, it's clear responsibility who is taking care of those cybersecurity actions on those systems. Then really go into the next slide, a little bit explaining how we implement in our environments the Spot central management. So what we are doing, we are running this Spot central management in our private cloud, since most of those sites, the connectivity towards the internet is not allowed at all. That blocks a lot of these malware attempts, of course, because there cannot be any backend that where they can connect. So the SOC, the connection is only towards to our SOC and Spot central management running there in the first phase. And then we can set up optionally. I think there's a lot of things PAT and SAT testing mentioned here. So that can be a kind of manual procedure, or we can set it up running as automatic, which is continuously pushing those scan results to our backend when there's a remote connection available. And then from this central management, then you can print out the different kind of compliance reports and vulnerability reports, which I will show a little bit further on the line. Okay, let's do quick. So this what is really the problem for us is that we have a lot of those assets in the networks, and we of course provide the asset list from our design systems, but there is always a possibility that there's a rogue asset. So how do you find those rogue assets and verify that we are delivering according to the standard? So the Spot will answer in this problematic, because we can do the compliance checking by the push of the button, and also find all of those rogue assets on the network. So verifying that the assets that we have delivered on those network segments are really the ones that we have also designed. And I think challenges, again, going back, following the IEC standard, and one of the big important thing is that we don't have a cybersecurity specialist everywhere, so we need to have tools that can be utilized by skilled engineers, so it doesn't require kind of a degree on cybersecurity before using these tools. And of course, lack of visibility is one of the things, and which I heard a lot of times in Manusek actually kept the score, that how many times you mentioned that asset management and visibility is the main thing for managing this delivery security here. So this heterogeneous environments was already mentioned by everybody who has been working in the industrial environments know the life cycle and kind of the problematic that there's a lot of vendors working in different kind of systems. And of course, there comes back to the resources. We cannot really manually do anything. We need to automate everything that we can to really make it viable to do the cybersecurity also. If you leave it to manual work processes, it's good for one case, but if you have hundreds of cases, then it's not really viable. So the answer for this is, of course, that we try to push this automation with the Spot and do it with central management. And as said, then you can get the automation needed. You will have those teams and roles defined, that who is taking care of what, and Spot will give you also instructions how to mitigate those recognized vulnerabilities from the software side or from the Spot side. So, and for us, of course, one of the big things is that we can really give also our customers the confirmation of compliance report, saying that what non-compliance towards the standard we have and how we have mitigated those. I can have give already an example about that. For example, RDP connectivity is a thought that is a non-compliant to the, because it's an unsafe way to connect, but surely we need a way to connect some of our Windows assets with RDP. So how we secure that RDP connectivity, what is the mitigation measure so that it's not open from everywhere and multi-factor authentication is enforced. So these kind of things we can do with Spot and really keep that visibility for our customers, that how these things are managed, and also the, as Jer mentioned, the cybersecurity insurance providers are really interested about these issues, and it has a huge impact on your insurance premiums. I think I don't have a lot of things. I think I can show you quickly going forward, show you quickly that you really have these nice visibility views on what assets do you have there in the system and how many vulnerabilities you have in an asset inventory. Then you will have, okay, I think I jumped one more, vulnerability reports you can print out, and of course this compliant confirmation of compliance you can print out with detailed explanation what are the and mappings on the different standards, that why this is a non-compliant towards that standard, and this is important for us also, that those security levels for which security level in IEC standard, for example, this system is verified against. Wrapping up, maybe again saying that this is part of our delivery that we will always do. We recognize that there's existing systems that this is not being implemented, and we can provide this as a service, and also the customers, other customers, and which are not using even ANDRITZ systems, we can provide this as a service. Full compliance to the IEC standard, as discussed, is very important for us, as it's coming from our quality, and it's the base standard. There's no way around for us. We need to follow it exactly, and I think that's about it for this. So please, Joel, if you take the lead.
Thank you, Tatu, and thank you, gentlemen. So now we turn to the Q&A section, and the first question is to you, Mats. You mentioned the NIST directive and the fact that it's being updated and that the scope will be extended a lot. So first of all, when do you think it is expected? And what would you say that affected organizations, are they aware of this? And would it make sense to start preparing now?
Excellent question, thank you. Well, the proposal is complete, and it seems everybody is sort of agreeing on it. The time plan is still unclear. France has the presidency and the EU Council, and they stated the other day that they're aiming to complete NIS 2 before they hand over the presidency, and that's in June. So if that's true, we'll see it sometime this spring. Then typically there's an 18 to 24 month period for everybody to get ready, and then it goes live. For me, I've seen very few organizations even talking about this, less preparing. And I think that's probably because it's surprisingly quiet in the media about this. Since the time to prepare will be short when it goes live, I would definitely recommend starting at least finding out if you're in scope or if any of your important customers are in scope. That would make a lot of sense, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mats. So next question to Tatu. We talked a lot about the responsibility for the supply chain. So where do you think that the liability for the cybersecurity lies within the supply chain?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think you could look into IEC standard and look what are the stakeholders there, your system integrator, the asset owner, and start looking into that. But I can only say that how we do it, we always define clearly in our documentation what is the cybersecurity activity on each delivered system. So are we responsible of patching the platforms also? Are we responsible of patching the systems, and for how long, and how long our services are going to last, so that customer really have a clear visibility on what services and what level of services we are providing. So it's also in the small machine builder, you cannot provide full-blown SIEM system on that environment if you are providing just a single PLC. So it's also always the scoping of the delivery.
All right, thank you. And please, other members of the panel, feel free to jump in if you have other comments. Yair, which regulations or standards do you usually see in the market today?
So I think unfortunately the answer is usually depends, but I'll try to provide more color to it. I think that it depends because it depends on the sector, whether we're talking about energy, utilities, or process industries, manufacturing industries, or whether we're talking about regions. In North America, you can see more NERC-CIP for the energy and utilities. In Germany, you'll probably see CRITIS and IT 2.0. NIST directive is pretty common. So it really depends in that perspective. I will say that from what we've seen, the IEC 62443 is probably the more elaborated one. It also comes from the ISO organization, which the background is really from industrial and automation. And it really provides a very detailed granularity level of requirements, and also sets different types of security levels that an organization can aim to achieve. And I think what we've seen, and this is why I think ANDRITZ here chose the right approach, is that you can really take this regulation and interpret it into a very technical requirements on different levels that really enable us to automate the process. Like we really check automatically on the asset level, security configurations like passwords, policies, and logon, and different registry keys, and sharing capabilities. And also on the network level, against Active Directory or against firewall segmentation. So we actually analyze the segmentation and whether it's properly segmented or not. So we can really provide very tangible value automatically, which is evidence-based. And I think the IEC 62443 is doing a great job in very detailed requirements in that perspective. So I think this is why we see it mainly, but it can really depend on the sector and region.
Thank you for that. So, we talked a lot about the standards and the regulations, and Tatu, when you were showing those slides, we saw the reports. So what happens when you at ANDRITZ, when you find gaps in security or compliance? Is this just a report, or do you also provide ways for your customers to mitigate with the gap?
Okay, just wanted to first shortly comment on here that it's if you look at our pulp and paper based standards like IEC 61511, it's mentioning the IEC standards. So it's kind of a, like I said, it's mandatory for us. There's no other way around. And on that industrial area, we must implement it because it's mentioned in the base standards. But coming back on your actual question that when we recognize the gaps, of course, when we recognize the gaps, the kind of a fresh installation system, then we will of course mitigate all the gaps and see what is the reason behind all those gaps. If we find a reason that we have a solution problem, then it comes back to the solution architecture that we need to do the type testing because it doesn't fulfill the delivery on that specific standard. So maybe there's some new requirement or new vulnerability has come, and it's the feedback is coming back from the field to the solutions that okay, now the solution is not really anymore up to the standard, and we need to make a mitigation measure. Saying that, I think the mitigation has been always in the OT area really heavy. You have a controlling system like it was in the year's slide. It's not possible always to patch them in a patch Tuesday every month, but you need to plan those, and for that time it's vulnerable for those. You need to assess what is the risk, and I think I'm looking forward to discuss with Mats because there's a kind of this risk score is always coming up from those CVEs databases. It's what does it mean in really closed up environment? What is the actual residual risk or this kind of a risk that is related to that specific system and attack vectors?
Great, thank you. And again, here, Mats, feel free to jump in if you have anything else to add. Yair, the next one is for you. So we talked in your slides about automation. So if automating the security or automating security by design is so good, then why don't all organizations do it?
Okay, good question. I think that eventually this whole market is still evolving from many aspects. Again, we've talked about many drivers and incentives, regulations, attacks that are happening, insurance, and I think that we are seeing different type of maturity levels in the market. There are some organizations that are just starting, and there are some organizations that are much more mature. But I do think that we do see a significant rise in the past, I would say, 2 years, in the demand for security solutions for the industrial and automation systems. And additionally, I do think that we're also seeing that up until now, a lot of organizations, and even if I'm taking ANDRITZ, for example, there were been a lot of manual and exhaustive processes that required more skilled set personnel on the commissioning phase and things like that. And they really tried their best to do whatever they can in that perspective. But I think when they approached us, they understood that we have a solution that can really automate that. And we are seeing today more and more types of machinery builders or automation providers starting to work with us on this as they see the value of reducing their costs, but providing much more value at the end to the end customer.
Excellent, thanks. Again, Mats or Tetsu, if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in. We're getting close to the end, so I think we have time for one more, and Mats, I'm going to address it to you. You mentioned the relationship between security and safety. Now, what would you say is the most important link between the two concepts now and looking into the future?
Oh, good question. I guess I will return to the quote I had from Mark Andreessen, software is eating the world, and that's really where the connection will be going forward, and to some extent already is. Safety will rely on software in many cases, and software will rely on a good security to guarantee its proper function. Ergo, safety will be linked to security through software and the way we manage our software and our systems at that. So cybersecurity is the connection, really.
All right, thank you for that. Tetsu or Yair, if you have anything, any closing statements, anything you want to add?
I think most of you have heard the Gartner prediction that cyber physical attacks will happen in before 2025. So that kind of, it's also, we are dealing a lot of with physical devices, and everybody who has worked with these actual physical devices know that if there is some HACCP recognized risk, it is possibly now possible to also initiate through the cyber attack vector. So what is your biggest risk on that HACCP? It's probably also a risk for cyber attack.
I think from my side, and even continuing what Tetsu just said, is that it's not just the predictions we're seeing from analysts, but also the ownership level that gets to board levels today. Because the risk is really something that, again, you can see in the market, the impact and effect it causes. And when we're talking about business leaders, you really need to start shifting towards a more risk-based approach to understand what's the context, because cybersecurity can be very overwhelming. And where should I start focusing? What's going to be the most risk reduction impactful action item I can do? So, and what's the potential impact to my production processes? So we are seeing a shift in the market, moving towards a risk-based approach in order to really tackle in the most cost-effective way this cyber and digital risk topic.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, that's all we have time for today, unfortunately. I want to thank every one of you for setting aside the time to join us on today's webinar. Mats, Yair, and Tetsu, a special thank you to you. I think the insights you provided were really valuable. I think we all understand that machine security is becoming a very important topic today. To the people who asked questions and didn't have time to answer, worry not, we will be emailing you personal answers after this event is done. If you need more information about what was presented today or have additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. The contact details are right now on the screen. We will have a recording of today's session available in a few hours on the OTORIO website under the resources section. So on behalf of everyone on this call, on behalf of OTORIO, ANDRITZ, and AFRY, I want to thank you again and stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.